This is Punch Drunk Philosophy.
What the fuck is up, everybody? I'm Adam Real for Punch Drunk Philosophy here with a striking breakdown for you. I was going to add this onto the podcast as a little extra segment, but it got too long, so I've decided to make it into its own separate video. There's so much to cover. This is just going to be an overview of some of the techniques in the fight that I thought were particularly interesting and gave Stephen Thompson a lot of success. Just a little help for new fans or people who haven't trained that much striking in order to appreciate and see what they're viewing. If you want to go into more depth, there's BJJ Scout, there's Luke Thomas's Monday Morning Analyst, a lot of really cool breakdowns that will cover this stuff in more detail. A bit of admin as usual, please like us on Facebook, Punch Drunk Philosophy. We're on Twitter, I think, at PED Philosophy. Like, subscribe, and all that jazz. But yeah, let's get on with it. Okay, first off, amazing fight. The performance of 2016, in my opinion, so far. Now, a lot of very interesting talking points in this fight when it comes to technique. Let's begin with the stance. If you've just started learning to strike, you might be very surprised by this because he's doing a lot of things that your coach would most definitely tell you not to do. Number one is he's got his hands down, all the way down, like they're below his waist, and he's standing very side on. Now, the sideways stance is very common in boxing because it makes your body a much smaller target and allows for a lot of lateral head movement, but in MMA there are defensive considerations, most notably the low kick. A very good fight to reference here is Changboy Katsungrit versus Rick Rufus. Rick Rufus was an American kickboxer who was very fast, very creative. He employed the side-on stance and he competed in rules where low kicks were not allowed. I believe at the time in kickboxing you could only kick above the waist. Changboy came from Muay Thai, obviously very, very different. In Muay Thai they allow knees, they allow elbows, and they allow kicks to the leg. This fight took place in 1988 and was billed as kickboxing versus Muay Thai, even though knees and elbows weren't allowed, so it wasn't Muay Thai, but whatever. Under the negotiated rules, kicks to the leg were allowed. Rick Rufus was faster, he had better hands, so he had a lot of success early. Changboy took full advantage of the vulnerability of the low kick though, and kicked the shit out of his legs. When you get kicked in the legs quite a lot, so much of your game is compromised, especially when it relies on movement. So why does being side-on leave you vulnerable to the low kick? Well, firstly, because it exposes the weakest side of your leg, the best part of your leg to kick. The back of your leg has a lot of vulnerable bits that are not shielded by a lot of muscle or bone, so when someone swings the anatomical equivalent of a baseball bat into them, it's going to do some damage. Secondly, standing side-on does not allow you to use the most common and effective way of defending the low kick, which is the shin block. It's commonly referred to as checking kicks. You put your shin up to make contact with their shin. It hurts like fuck, but it hurts them a whole lot more, which, as a consequence, discourages them from using the move. You have to stand in a much more squared-on stance when using the shin block. The reason for this being, think of the shin like a plastic ruler. If you hit it on its flat side, it's a lot easier to break than if you hit it on its narrower pointed end. The shin is very much the same. Bas Rutten did a very good video of this after the UFC 168 Anderson Silva leg break. I highly recommend checking that out. I'll link in the description. Also, standing side on really expands what's known as the dead side, which is basically just the area you can't strike and you're vulnerable. The other major, perhaps most notable thing is the hands down approach. The two most common defensive techniques are blocking and parrying. You can't do that to strikes coming to the head if you have your hands all the way down by your waist. Fighters who adopt this approach often rely on head movement to get out of the way of shots, but as you saw at UFC 164 with Anderson Silva, this doesn't always work out. Now, this is what makes strikers like Stephen Thompson and Dominic Cruz so fucking fascinating. They do so many things that challenge a lot of striking basics. And these defensive basics are in place for a very good reason. Number one, they're the easiest to learn. Number two, they're the easiest to implement. Number three, they're the lowest risk. But Stephen Thompson makes shunning that work very, very well for him. There are a lot of advantages to this. Having your hands down low helps you get double underhooks from a takedown very quickly. Anderson Silva used to do that a lot. It allows your punches to come from very odd angles. It allows for a lot of balance and movement. Like I said earlier, it allows for a lot of lateral head movement in a boxing crouch, Muhammad Ali-esque way. Gets your head off the centre line very quickly and effectively. And as you can see at the start of this fight, very good defensive tool used by Stephen Thompson is that front kick. He's constantly bouncing it, and it's constantly ready to make Hendricks question closing the distance and give him something to worry about. But anyways, yeah, let's advance on in this. I've talked for 4 minutes and it's only 4 seconds into the fight. One of the most fascinating and effective assets possessed by Stephen Wonderboy Thompson is his ambidexterity. He uses it so effectively in this fight. In the first 20 seconds, we see two of the main ways he switches stances. The first way, he begins in southpaw, then he backs off and circles square on, and when he resets, he's in orthodox. The second method, and most commonly used in this fight, is masking the change of stance with strikes. As you can see here, Thompson begins in orthodox, fires off a kick, and when he resets, he's in southpaw. You see this time and time again when Thompson is striking. He goes in with one stance and then comes out with another. This makes it very hard for Hendricks to find his rhythm and get comfortable in the fight. Firstly, you have to notice and process that Thompson has switched stance. Then you have to adjust all your plans of attack around it, especially for a guy like Hendricks when his main weapon is that big left straight. Fighting an orthodox fighter and fighting a southpaw fighter comes with all those different sets of considerations. And when you involuntarily have to switch between those every 10 seconds, that's going to really throw you off, especially when you're getting punched and kicked in the face in between. Now let's go over what Hendricks wants to do in this fight. Firstly, there's the takedown. Use his wrestling advantage and take Thompson out of his comfort zone. Secondly, there's closing the distance, taking away that 6-inch reach advantage that Thompson has and landing some power punches of his own. And thirdly, damage Thompson's legs. Use low kicks, use knees to the leg, slow him down. To be effectively prepared, Thompson has to have an answer for all three of these, and boy does he. At 30 seconds into the fight, Hendricks is working on all three of these. He's closed the distance, he's got the clinch, he's working on a takedown, and he's doing damage to the leg with knees. Thompson is very prepared for this. He's trained with some of the best wrestlers in the world for this fight. He looks very calm, very composed. He's using that right arm whizzer to stop Hendricks from taking his back and posting up on that left arm to stop his hips from being planted on the canvas. Staying calm, he uses the building blocks to get back up. Fights for that right knee, fights for that left knee, and now he can get back to standing. Back in the standing clinch, Thompson uses Hendricks' own momentum against him and times his escape perfectly. That's the last success Hendricks has in this fight, and now it's all Stephen Thompson. Now, I talked earlier about having your hands low. Stephen Thompson here is exaggerating all this by having his chin out, head down, and out. He looks very vulnerable here, but that's the point. It's bait. He wants Hendricks to come in because he's ready with a counter. It's like Wile E. Coyote putting some food out for Roadrunner and then hiding around the corner with a mallet. Hendricks uses a couple of body feints to test this, and he can clearly see that Wonderboy is very ready for him to come in. And sure enough, when Hendricks does come in, Thompson's ready with punches. So we're just over a minute into the fight and Thompson's already shown that he has an answer for the takedown and he has an answer for closing the distance. Two of the things we discussed earlier. Now this next exchange is very interesting. Thompson plants a killer side kick to the body. Hendricks takes and acknowledges the shot and is pushed back. When he goes to reset position though, he's almost strutting casually, like this is a mini timeout when he can't be hit. It's a bad habit that grows with a lot of guys who do very friendly sportsman-like sparring, where when you land a big hit, you allow your partner to reset and readjust. Hendricks is the main guy in his camp. It's purely speculative my saying this, but it is quite possible that he was shown too much respect in sparring and has developed some of these habits. But Thompson is responding before Hendricks has a chance to get his bearings and get back in the fight. He throws another kick, fakes it going to the body and comes over and gets it to the head, which is undefended because Hendricks, anticipating the kick going to the body, has put his hand down to parry. Now I've chosen to showcase this for a couple of reasons. Really juicy technique. He's playing with anticipation and pattern recognition, always making him anticipate the body shot whilst going to the head and vice versa, never being predictable. Later on in the fight you see him fire off a jab cross and then he comes in the exact same way, throws a jab cross but includes a kick to the head on it. Hendricks blocked that head kick this time, but somebody who gauged the jab cross and thought the exact same thing was going to happen then and thought the combo was over would drop their guard and go for a counter strike here, leaving themselves open. So playing with this anticipation is a very, very, very effective way of getting people to open up. And secondly, his timing. Hendricks talked in the post-fight press conference about being very thrown off about the times that Thompson was choosing to hit him. All the way through this fight, Thompson is mixing up his rhythms. If you've studied music, he's basically firing off here on the quavers against a guy who's anticipating crotchets in 4-4. Now let's move forward a bit. Thompson is tagging Hendricks repeatedly and has turned up the intensity. A couple of times, Hendricks tries to employ the third thing we were talking about earlier in damaging the leg. He goes for the low kick, but sure as shit, Thompson is ready for it. If you rewatch this, it's incredible. Thompson is already firing off the counterpunch when Hendricks is starting to throw the kick. It's practically simultaneous. The key to shutting down your opponent's game is make them pay for everything. Robbie Lawler is very, very good at doing this with takedowns. As soon as someone goes for a takedown on him, he counters and then he hits them hard. So next time they're going to go for it, they're going to think twice. And you see that happen in this fight. Hendricks is thinking twice about everything he does. There even comes a point later where Thompson has his back up to the fence again, and Hendricks does nothing because he's second guessing and doubting himself so much, so suspicious of that counter. So now let's cut to the end of the fight. Hendricks has now been baited into doing absolutely everything an effective counter-striker wants their opponent to do. He's getting reckless and desperate. As you can see here, he's really overreaching and off balance. Just desperate to land something and maybe get some kind of Hail Mary shot in. Probably one of the most prominent examples of this going wrong is either Forrest Griffin, Anderson Silva, or Ryan Bader on Lyoto Machida. Which I think conclusively proves going forward, frustrating and wild on a counter-striker is not the best plan. You're playing into their game. Thompson is consistently tagging him every time he comes in with perfect accuracy. With this second right in the exchange, he angles off perfectly and catches him on the chin. Hendricks is very rocked at this point, and Thompson's going to go in for the finishing moves. When someone starts throwing their arms out defensively like Hendricks is here, you know that they're done. They've lost all bearings and they're running on pure instinct. Thompson fires off some punches and then a body push kick to keep him on the fence. Again, making him think about the body and the head, confusing the shit out of an already dazed Johny Hendricks. Hendricks' guard is fragile, and Thompson, to keep him guessing again, throws this spinning back kick. A fucking awesome attack. And even though it doesn't connect clean, it connects hard. And here is the kill shot. Look at Johny Hendricks' toes. He's completely in the air and off balance and very vulnerable. He's circling to his left, and as you do when you're circling, you're mostly focused on strikes coming from the direction you're circling to. So that hand coming from the right completely took him by surprise, right on the jaw. Bosh, job done. Incredible performance from Stephen Thompson. This is, without a doubt, one of my favourite UFC fights of all time now. Partly because I won a lot of money on it, picking Stephen Thompson by knockout, but also just a beautiful array of technique used. So many interesting things. But yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of other breakdowns on YouTube right now about it, so check that out if you want to go into more depth about the technique that was used in this fight. Like us on Facebook, facebook.com/punchdrunkphilosophy. We're on Twitter @PEDphilosophy. Like, subscribe, and all that. You know, if you liked, of course, like leave a mean comment if you didn't. If you want to hear more of our perspectives on Stephen Thompson and that UFC Fight Night in general, then please check out this week's podcast. It's a really good one with Ben Sinfield. We go into all this and the implications for Stephen Thompson's career. I'm Adam Real for Punch Drunk Philosophy. Thank you for watching. Wow.